Hello everyone, Grin Spickett here. Welcome to the first episode of Everybody's Guide to Remote Viewing. We're going to talk about what is remote viewing. This is a disambiguation. The term remote viewing is kind of overloaded at this point and has grown really chubby, okay? There's a lot of meaning stuffed in there, and different people use the term in different ways. I've identified, I believe, four levels. Four levels of remote viewing.
By levels, I mean the term remote viewing is used in four different ways, with level 1 being the most specific and distinct, and level 4 being the most broad and nebulous.
And those four levels are going to get picked apart a bit. So let's start by talking about basketball. Okay, we're going to talk about basketball. So this is going to be our level 1. Level 1, what do you need to play basketball? Well, you need some people. That guy's a really tall guy. You need a hoop. You need the ball. You need other teammates. You need referee with the whistle. Stop doing that. You did that wrong. Okay. You need a court. You also need rules that people are going to follow in order to play the game. Those are everything you need for level 1 of basketball, okay? Let's talk about level 2 of basketball. Let's say you've got this team over here. This team over here has spent a lot of time planning and training certain techniques. They have plays that they've worked out. They have a strategy that they're going to follow as they go through the game of basketball. That's level 2. That's level 2. The strategy that they're using, the techniques that they're using in order to play the structured game of basketball within the rules is level 2. Okay. Or we have this team over here. They have a lot of really strong natural ability. They didn't really want to work out plays. Everybody's been kind of training, and they're going to go by their gut, and they're going to go and rely on their natural teamwork and instinct, and they're going to play a game of basketball with that strategy, which is sort of, not really a strategy at all. It's let's just all do our best and use our natural abilities. That also could be level 2, because it's about how that team is going to play that structured game of basketball, and it's different from how the other team is going to play, because they have their plans, their specific techniques, the plays that they've worked out, but they're all still playing basketball within the rules. Level 3 is a little bit different. Level 3 is maybe this guy's at home and he's shooting hoops and he's practicing and he's practicing and he's practicing. But there's no court, there's no referee, there's no other team, there's not really any rules. He's just practicing the raw elements that are needed, those ingredients that are needed that are going to get used in order to play the game of basketball in level 1. But in this level 3, he's just practicing shooting those hoops. So that's level 3. You have to ask yourself at this point, is he playing basketball or is he just practicing things that are useful in basketball? Okay, and then level 4. Level 4. There's a FedEx pilot, and he crashes on an island. And when he crashes on the island, he's stranded, and his only companion is a volleyball.
Wilson!
That's level 4 of playing basketball. Okay? Because you know what? Whatever the heck it is, it's not basketball at this point. Okay? So those are the 4 levels of basketball, and I hope you will understand how this relates to the 4 levels of remote viewing.
Before we go any further, let's at least get down a base definition of remote viewing. We can then look at this concept through the lens of 4 different levels of meaning. Remember that level 1 is the most formal and least ambiguous, and level 4 would be the most broad and most ambiguous. To start, here's a level 2 definition of remote viewing from our subreddit. Remote viewing is the practice of seeking impressions about a distant or unseen target using paranormal means, in particular extrasensory perception or sensing with mind. I recommend you read the full definition of remote viewing on the International Remote Viewing Association's website. It's about 2 pages long, and that would be a level 1 type definition.
So let's talk about the 4 levels of remote viewing now that you're all experts at basketball, okay? The first level is the scientific protocol. This is much like the rules, the standardized rules and elements of the game of basketball. So in IRV, there are really 4 main steps that define a scientific protocol. Okay, so part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. And to be a remote viewing protocol, you really ought to have these 4 things. First of all, you have to have planned and targeted, okay? You don't do it aimlessly. You have a specific objective in mind. That could be a person, a place, a thing, an event, forwards or backwards in time or at the current moment. So random insights and feelings that just pop up out of nowhere when you're not planning to do remote viewing are not remote viewing, and as far as this is concerned. Second, the data in the session, that's supposed to be a pencil, okay? It has to be recorded, okay? That record needs to be kept so that it can be evaluated and analyzed and compared later on. It needs to be double blind, preferably double blind. The remote viewer and anyone present during this session should not really know what the target is, which if you're not familiar with remote viewing, that seems disingenuous. How do you get information about something that you don't know what it is? Well, that is part of what makes remote viewing work, is by not knowing what the target is, the person has less prejudgment of the information that they receive by remote viewing. Blinding, you can have different levels of blinding, and that's defined in your protocol. Step 4, you need to get feedback. You need to be able to see the results later. How on earth do I represent that? Feedback, I'll just put glasses because you get to see the results, okay?
When possible, the viewers should receive feedback so they can evaluate how well they performed. But more importantly, the viewer's data should be evaluated against what is known about the target and what is eventually known about the target, allowing for their results to be quantified. The 4 elements of a scientific protocol may vary in degrees depending on application, but they should be defined up front.
Within those rules, there's a lot of wiggle room. The protocol acts as a wrapper for the methods. The methods of remote viewing. The methods of remote viewing are steps or plans the remote viewer might follow, and they can be structured or unstructured. Structured remote viewing methods have names like CRV, SRV, TDS, or TDRV, okay, TRV, and these are like plans or blueprints to be executed, sort of like the basketball players, the team that was practicing, and they had different plays that they were going to try to use, specific techniques that they were going to use while playing basketball. They're following not really a script, but they're using tools and they're employing them in a certain way to try to play the game of basketball. Well, here, a remote viewer is trying to follow these sort of plans, these plays, the playbook, to help them to have an effective session for remote viewing. On the unstructured side is more of a natural, free-flowing thing. You might hear about extended remote viewing. These kinds of remote viewing are more free form. Somebody uses natural ability and they let things happen as they happen. That doesn't mean that they're not distinguishing between fantasy and reality, or their imagination and the hopefully true information they're receiving, but they're not as scripted, not as pre-planned. They don't follow a specific format the same way that the structured methods do. So that's level 2 of remote viewing. Now, when we say scientific protocol, we don't mean that science and scientists are going to believe what we're doing, but it's scientific because the results can be measured and quantified. And the methods part is more of an art. It's much more free form. It's much more open as to what can happen there. Pretty much anything can happen at that point in time. And then level 3 was like the basketball player at home shooting hoops for practice. He isn't really playing basketball at that point. There's not really rules. He's developing natural talent. So let's call that natural ability. Remote viewing is kind of like psychic soup, okay? Because what happens in the methods area within the protocol, it can use any type of psychic pathway. We don't really know. There's clairvoyance, there's precognition, retrocausality, retrocognition, claircognizance, clairaudience, telepathy. Some people claim psychokinesis or remote influencing. All these different possible psychic functionings and functions and abilities can happen and be employed in the methods part of the scientific protocol of remote viewing. But to do them on their own is not remote viewing. And remember, we have 4 elements of the protocol of remote viewing, and one is that it's planned and targeted. So if you're at home and you have a feeling that you need to duck out of the way of something flying past your head, and you duck out of the way, that's awesome. That's an awesome natural ability. It's not remote viewing, okay? Similarly, you're asleep and you have a dream, and the dream tells you something about a future. That's cool. That's precognition. But if it wasn't planned and targeted, and you didn't record it, and you weren't blind to it, and you can't get feedback later on to see if it's correct or not, then that might fall under natural ability of precognition, but it's not remote viewing. It's an elemental thing that's helpful, remote viewing, but it's not remote viewing. And so once we get past the first 2, we're kind of exiting remote viewing, and we're entering into what in the remote viewing subreddit we might call a tangent. It's tangential to remote viewing. Level 4 is what the heck? Okay, these are things that we don't even know what they are, because there's no possibility of feedback. They're totally unplanned. They're not necessarily related. They're definitely not done in protocol. So this might be the case of you're having a lucid dream, and an alien abducts you, and they implant you, and rainbows shoot out of your ears, and then you ask your uncle what happened, and he said, well, sounds like remote viewing to me. So you say, oh, I was remote viewing, and you come say, hey guys, did I remote view? And then our answer is almost always no, because whatever the heck happened, you didn't plan on it, you didn't target anything, you weren't blind to it, and there's no way to know if there's any feedback. So these experiences are almost always off topic, and as far as the remote viewing subreddit goes, they might not make it. We might remove them because they're off topic. Okay, I know this isn't the flashiest video so far, but let's look at it one more way. Okay, so we're gonna look at this as wrappers. We have the protocol. Inside the protocol we have methods. Inside the methods we have natural ability. When people like Russell Targ talk about Patanjali and Yoga Sutras and remote viewing going back thousands of years, they're really kind of talking about natural ability, because there wasn't any protocol being followed, and they weren't necessarily any specific methods either. So the protocol, inside of that sits the methods. This is science. Science-based, science formatted, because it's measurable. The method's more like art. And then you have your natural ability. And then over here, you have somebody eating crayons, okay? And that's level 4, and it's not really a level of remote viewing at all, but people think it is.
you're going to come across many different people on the internet who are talking about remote viewing. Some people are talking about the protocol, the scientific protocol of remote viewing. Others are talking about how remote viewing is done, the specific methods. Others are talking about the very basic elements of remote viewing, the psychic powers, the natural abilities that are available to humans that make remote viewing work. And the rest of the people are talking about stuff that they're calling remote viewing, but really doesn't have much to do with it. Knowing that these 4 different levels of meaning are possible for remote viewing will help you to pick out who really knows what they're talking about and who does not. I'll leave you with a final quote by Joe McMoneagle. "It is in my opinion that if someone can provide accurate information while operating within an approved or appropriate IRVA protocol, while standing on their head in a bucket of mud, whistling Dixie through their left nostril while wearing a pink tutu, then like it or not, that's remote viewing." What he means is, it's the results that matter most. The methods matter far, far less, and everything else is not remote viewing. Thank you.